Welcome to Inside Creative Minds. I'm your host, Trey Goodman. We're here at the Tempe Historical Museum. What a great place full of fun exhibits. And speaking of fun, on today's show we have two linguistics professors who study humor and some other things. Check it out. Well, thanks so much for joining me here at Copper Star Coffee, one of my favorite coffee places in Central Phoenix. And two distinguished guests we have today, two professors at ASU in the School of English, Don and Aline.
Right.
Hi.
I mean, class is in session, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now let's let our viewers know, this is an unusual situation. You're married.
Yes, we are.
You've been teaching for 35 plus years
Absolutely.
in the same field.
In the same field.
We met each other in the class.
How many people can say that in, say, the United States?
Not very many. Not very many.
The scientists say you have to fall in love over a petri dish.
Yeah?
If you work so hard, you don't have time for recreation, so you've got to marry somebody you work with. Well, it usually works.
So we did. So we did.
Off camera, Don said basically you're joined at the hip.
Oh, we are, but
Right.
yeah, we are.
Pretty much.
Talk
pretty
about
much.
that a little
We've
bit.
been joined at the hip for 50 years. We've been married for 50 years.
Yeah.
We just celebrated our 50th wedding anniversary.
And teaching your linguistics and your
English education.
education. 35 years at Arizona State
At
University.
Arizona State University.
It took me 2 years to convince him to really hire me. So he gets his 35-year pin 2 years before I get mine.
She came in as an administrator first before she came into the English department. She was working in the Regent's office and in the President's office and in the graduate college.
That was in my 35 years.
It was in your
No,
35
they first
years,
hired me
yeah.
to supervise student teachers, and I still do the same thing, but now I get paid for it.
How difficult was it back in probably in the 70s
Yeah,
to become a doctor, a professor, and you're a female? Can you talk about that a little bit?
It wasn't expected.
Right.
And we lived, Don's first real job after he got his degree at the University of Michigan, we lived in Cedar Falls. And I had to commute down to the University of Iowa, get up at 4 o'clock in the morning on Monday mornings and come back Friday night. And I took our daughter with us, and our neighbors would say, "Oh, how stupid of you. Look, you're moving to Arizona now. You could have just gotten it at ASU, the same." But I couldn't have had a job here.
Yeah.
So it was worth it. And one day, the neighbor across the street was up the same time just because her boy had a paper route. And this was only 4 months I had to do this.
Now, we caught some footage of you team teaching at ASU.
Oh, yeah.
And I'd have to admit, after 35 years, you guys seem to have as much passion as you probably had in year one. I mean, the class was it was in humor. We're going to talk about
We're getting
some
more
humor.
passionate all the time.
You're not running out of things after 35
Oh,
years?
no. We're finding out. That's what education is. It isn't find out things or learn things. It's to learn what you don't know. And you get deeper, you delve deeper and deeper, but the more you know, the more you realize you don't know.
What are you trying to teach? What's your message you're trying to get across?
Well, I want people to have intellectual curiosity.
Right.
That's what keeps people alive. You learn something new.
Right.
And with humor and with names, the stuff we do, there's always new things to learn.
I mean, you guys are involved in a humor society.
We are. We're the founders of the International Society for Humor Studies, and I'm still the historian, and Aline is a member of the editorial board.
The founders of
The
the
founders
International
of it.
Well,
Yes.
we had conferences at ASU every year, April Fool's Day weekend for 7 years. And then after we had used up all the favors anybody ever owed us, we said, well, you guys better move
That's right. So we went international at that point.
International study of humor.
International study of humor. We've been to Sydney, Australia. We've been to Hawaii. We've been to.
It's in out of the United States every other
So
year.
you guys are sitting around studying jokes or telling jokes, or I mean, how do I get in on this?
Okay, jokes. We have Aline and I have written an encyclopedia, and we have like 110 different entries, and one of them is jokes.
Okay.
So jokes is one of the aspects
Right.
of humor studies, but there's humor in literature. There's how humor differs from culture to culture.
That's what surprised us. We thought it would be all English teachers like us who would come. Doctors came, more nurses than
Well,
doctors. They were more interested.
Psychologists
Scientists
were very interested in the field.
Now you
Yeah.
have several books published. I mean, not just. I mean, how many? Ballpark.
15,
something like that.
something like that.
But for a while we didn't write together. Our marriage counselor made us promise not to write any more books together.
You guys certainly stay
Writing
busy.
together is hard.
Yeah, I can imagine a lot of collaborative. And,
Yeah,
and
but
who's gonna?
But then we
put
sort of
forth-
figured out we do different things, and so we specialize in different things. And I do some of the first rough draft kind of stuff, and she does all of the fine-tuning the real work.
Well, let's talk about humor. What is the origin of humor? Has it always been around? And
It's always been around, but it's changed a lot. A lot of the earlier humor had nothing to do with language. It was like the humor in sculptures, the humor in, for instance, at Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, France, in the Ile de la Cité. There is one of the statues there is, I think it's Saint Stephen, who was beheaded, and he's holding his own head. Okay, that's humorous.
Yeah.
And the sculptors used to put terrible things way up at the top because they knew the priests would never climb up the.
Okay. Well, you know, when we were in your class, you were talking about is there a line? How do you go over the line? The whole PC. Can you speak to that?
Eileen, you want to?
Well, it has to be close to the edge, and you know when you've gone over because it's not funny anymore.
But
if you have offended people,
who
well, it'll be
decides that?
funny to some
Yeah.
people, but not to others.
Right.
And like we went to the English Teachers Convention in San Antonio, and I was talking on humor and the presidential campaign.
Right.
I predicted that 11 months ago. There'd be a lot of humor. I could do my paper on it. And I started out with jokes about Sarah Palin, and 2 women got and walked out.
Okay.
Tell some
And
of
I
your
thought-
Twilight jokes.
No.
No,
I don't want
they're past the edge.
Why is some stuff funny? You know, hilariously funny to some folks, and other folks will go, I don't get it, or I don't like it, or you know, whether it's a stand-up comedian, with some people are enormously popular, other ones.
We all have our buttons, and if you push my particular button, some things are going to offend me. There is no one who doesn't have some buttons that are there, some targets or some subjects that are offensive. Everybody has those things, but they're different for different people, and so you have to figure out your audience. You have to know your audience really, really well.
And that's why jokes work in a nice little group. And when we get in trouble is when somebody tells jokes to a huge audience, and the huge audience can't possibly be thinking the same or have had the same experiences.
And yet your jokes have to be edgy but they
Right.
can't be too edgy. And so we have Robert Priest, who is a scholar, decided that there's what
He's
he calls
the
the
psychologist at West Point.
the psychologist at West
Yeah.
Point. They were having lots of trouble with women recruits and gendered humor and this kind of thing. And so he figured out the Mitch theory of humor, which is moderate intergroup conflict humor. And this theory says that humor has to be edgy, but it can't be too edgy. And then, but it, depending on your audience, it's too edgy for some people. It's not
Right.
edgy enough for other people.
Yeah.
So
Is the
you have
line
to sort of
always
decide.
moving then?
It is always
always,
moving line.
always.
It's a moving target, absolutely. And you have to, and plus the fact that you have to warm your audience. And if you warm your audience, you can bring more people over to accept edgier humor. But if you don't warm your audience, you're dead in the water.
What is the purpose of humor?
Oh boy. Well, Eileen and I have worked with something called features, functions, and subjects of humor. When you ask for the purpose of humor, you're talking about the functions of humor.
Right.
And in the functions of humor, you have the psychological functions, the educational functions. The psychological functions, you use it as for self-defense, for status, for social bonding, for deciding who's a part of for gatekeeping, for all kinds of things.
And even people who are angry with each other, they think that you can tell hostile jokes.
Yeah.
And that keeps you from going out and hitting somebody.
Do you think in general people should just lighten up a little bit, or?
Well, maybe, but if it really hurts somebody.
See, the thing, humor relates to taboos, and taboos change.
Right.
And for a long, long time, we've had censorship from the right, from the fundamentalist conservative right. You're not supposed to do anything against religion or against, God or about.
Don't make fun of your parents.
Don't make fun of your parents.
Respect
Don't say
elders.
anything sexual, body parts, body functions, anything like that. Now we're getting censorship from the other direction in addition. So now you say you can't say anything that's ethnic, you can't say anything that's gendered, you can't say anything about old people, you can't say anything about crippled people.
What's left, right?
Exactly right. But the point is everything is left.
Yeah.
And as Bill Maher says with his politically incorrect program, you've got to target politically incorrect subjects just as you have to target the conservative subjects.
Well, and it seems like comedy is very, very popular. You know, whether it's satire. I mean, you've got Comedy Central that has all sorts of.
Oh,
Well, and you
yeah,
have
but
the
it's
John
24
Daly
hours
Show,
a
Exactly.
day.
and
Yeah.
you have the
So-
Colbert Report.
But do you find that humor and comedy in the United States different from other countries? I mean, you've obviously an international society. So
Absolutely.
What is the main difference?
Well, we lived in Afghanistan for 2 years, way longer.
wow.
We took our 3 little kids. And there the humor was used to teach lessons. They had all these stories about Mullah Nasruddin, and they were logic lessons.
Okay.
And they were very not humorous in our culture.
We come and Don tells them to his classes, and,
And
they
they-
just sit there and he said, see,
but-
I told you you wouldn't laugh.
I tell them as an example of a non-humorous, humorous situation. Like, I am as strong now as I was when I was 18 years old, because in my backyard is this huge rock, and I couldn't lift it when I was 18 years old.
Right.
And I still can't lift it. Okay, we think it's funny, but it's not really funny. It's just logically weird. It's just a different kind of, very different sense of humor.
Do you enjoy seeing all the different styles?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
For example, one of the things is, like in Native American humor, Navajo humor, it's very, very much part of the culture. Practical jokes and constant and very much integrated into the culture itself.
Okay.
Japanese humor is very much not integrated into the culture. So that in Japanese humor, from 8 to 5 during working hours, no humor. But after you get off, then you have karaoke and you
Okay.
make fun of the boss and
Wow.
you get really drunk and you have lots of fun. But during working hours, you separate. You separate the work and the play.
Well, guys, we have a lot more to talk about. We want to get into naming. We want to get into young adult literature. But one more question about humor before we take a break.
Sure.
What would you want your students to come away from taking a class in humor? What's the nugget you want to have them have?
I want them, because I work with teachers, I want them to know that wakes up kids in class and that humor serves a purpose. If you're laughing, your adrenaline is flowing and you're listening, you're concentrating, and kids pick up and they're not bored. If they're just asleep at the desk, it's no use. And so it's perfectly fine to let the funny kids be funny.
Yeah.
Jim Carrey's teacher used to let him, if he would not interrupt the class for the whole week, Friday afternoon, he could do a comedy show.
Wow.
A joke is like a test. And the person who is listening to this joke either catches on, passes the test, or doesn't catch on, fails the test. So that's one of the educational functions of humor. Again, it makes you alert, you remember longer, you really relate to it. It's an engaging thing.
Well, guys, we're going to take a short break, grab a coffee.
Sounds
and,
good.
we'll pick it right back up, okay?
Sounds
Good.
great. Sounds great.
Where are you going to show up this weekend? ShowUp.com is your valley-wide connection to theater, music, dance, art, and a whole lot more. The ShowUp.com calendar and discount ticket marketplace has something for everyone. Enjoy a fun activity with family, have a quiet, romantic date, or some exhilarating action with friends. It's fast, it's free, and it's all online at ShowUp.com. So where are you going to show up this weekend? ShowUp.com. It's all you got to do.
Well, professors, welcome back to Copper Star Coffee. And you couldn't find a better place, I think, to have a discussion about language, linguistics, naming, young adult
Absolutely.
literature than at a coffee shop,
Really
right?
great place.
It's a talk shop.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Well, we had a great conversation about humor, and I think we could have continued that for another half-hour show. But you guys are also involved in naming. Symbols, names.
Language as a whole.
Metaphor.
Metaphors. Yeah.
And especially teaching kids. You're not just teaching them vocabulary, you're teaching them how to think
Right.
when they can see all the connections between words that are related.
Right. Well, why is that so important, do you think?
Because it's such an efficient way to learn language. They give kids vocabulary tests, that's the best predictor of success. But the poor kids who haven't had lots of experiences and haven't had people help them see that they're related don't get it. They have to learn each one all by itself. I want to teach kids 10 words at a time from the same root.
Now, you guys are co-presidents of is it the American Naming Society?
That's right, the American Names Association.
Names Association? And you guys are co-presidents?
Yes, we are.
Have
Well,
they ever had co-presidents?
I don't
No.
think they have. No.
They
Tell
asked
why.
us to do it because Don will carry the projector and the PowerPoint
Okay.
thing in the laptop to the convention. He did it 3 or 4 years ago. And they got this bright idea, well, could you do that again? Eileen, could you be president? And I said, well, you really want let us be co-presidents because Don's
Okay.
the one who brings the computer and the projector. And they said, yes, but this is our last year. But I think they'll be hurt if we don't keep bringing the projector.
Well, let's talk about names. I know you brought some samples. If you could bring those up, Don. And
Oh, yeah.
Well,
Hannah.
these are some metaphor
yeah,
examples. And
right.
Let me show this. I went to the McCamey Middle School in Tempe
Yeah.
and was talking about language and names, and this little
Right.
boy raised his hand and said, well, a manager has to be a man. It says so right there in the word.
because it has the word man.
absolutely,
yeah.
Okay.
absolutely.
And I was trying to give him a lecture on gender issues and how we don't think the
Right.
same old ways now. And I had to go home and say, let me come back tomorrow. I'm sure that's not the case. So I went home and consulted Don, looked things up, and found out that manus is the Latin root for hand.
Okay.
And so when I came back the next day, this little girl said, yes, I got a manicure. See?
Right.
And then we talked about all the other words. That a manual is the same thing as a handbook.
Right.
And the best word, it took me a long time to learn this one, I didn't have that. Emancipate means to free yourself from someone else's hands. The E is away from. And a manuscript is handwritten. And manacles, what's the name for manacles? Handcuffs.
Handcuffs,
The kids
yeah.
all knew handcuffs. They didn't know
sure.
manacles.
Manacles.
So they learned the word that
And
day.
what do you got here on this one?
And well, just the hand, and then we
Oh.
hold them up together.
Oh, I see.
And
Okay.
let them make the comparison.
Wow.
And
So they really learn from,
yeah,
from stuff
yeah,
like that.
handicraft, the manual arts. And that's the kind of thing I think that really teaches thinking. Sometimes they're just coincidences
Right.
that words are the same, but kids need to learn to figure out the difference.
Well, there's so much involved with naming things, whether it's people or
Absolutely.
items or symbols. I mean, it seems like anyone that becomes famous, you find out later that maybe their name is not their real name. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
That, absolutely.
I mean,
they changed their name.
why is that?
Well, it's different things, and you can change your name different directions. You can change your name to make it worse, to make it better, to make it
What do you
more
mean by
ethnic.
worse or better? I mean,
Engelbert Humperdinck.
Okay.
There was a guy named Engelbert Humperdinck. That's a bad sounding name. You'd think that no one would want that name. Someone later, a rock star singer, chose the name Engelbert Humperdinck. Originally, it was a German composer, or David Copperfield. That's a name that has been reused.
Right.
But a lot of teenagers, we did a whole book on names and naming in young adult literature.
Okay.
As people say goodbye to childhood, hello to adulthood, they want a different name. And I'm going around telling people, Barack Obama's name is very American. And they say, what? And I say,
Exactly,
well,
what?
he was named after his father. And lots of mothers do that purposely. My feminist friends say, well, it's good to name. I want to help my husband feel related to this child. I know I'm related. I'm not sure he doesn't feel that connection. So he was named exactly after his father. His father changed his name when he was a teenager. He came to Hawaii to study from Kenya, changed his name to Barry. The mother was named Stanley Ann Dunham, I think. She changed her name when she was a
So
teenager.
it's
And-
very much a cultural.
And Barry,
Absolutely, it is. It is.
Barry was the boy's name that he grew up with. He changed it to Barack when he was in college and said, I wanted to grow up.
Because names are unique identifiers, and they're something that's totally associated with you. So you want a name that's sort of unique and special, and no one else has.
It's the only piece of language we can invent ourselves that authors can.
And
Every
authors,
other word we have to
Yeah,
take
you
somebody
find a lot of
somebody else
authors
has done it.
obviously are not using they have a pen
Yeah.
name,
Well,
as it's called, right?
That's right. They have a pen name like
Samuel
Yeah,
Clemens.
yeah.
Mark Twain, Samuel Clemens,
Yeah.
and Charles Dodson. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
yeah, Lewis Carroll.
Lewis Carroll.
Right.
Yeah, and what amazes me is that men who write romance novels, they
Yeah.
change their names to have a feminine sounding name. And in young adult
And
books,
it can go the other direction
even
too.
J.K. Rowling
Right.
is that thing that they didn't want boys to be turned off, that this was obviously a girl's name. S.E. Hinton, who wrote the first young adult books.
And a lot
Susan
of names
Elizabeth.
really invoke symbols or have names. I mean, like a Ferris wheel,
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
right? Or Zamboni,
Yeah.
for example.
Yeah.
Name,
You know,
Yeah.
you
named
name
af-
things after the things you've invented or the things you've discovered. Even America was named after Amerigo Vespucci.
Yeah.
And Columbus, Ohio was named after Columbus, the
So you must find that fascinating because that,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
goes on and on.
At the
and on. I mean,
Names Association, they have people talk about, what are they called when someone's named after somebody else? Eponyms.
Right.
But we did a paper one year called Generic Eponyms, and we talked about Bob and Joe, Joe Sixpack, and Joe the plumber.
Yeah.
Well, and jacks, you play the game of jacks. Why? Because these little things look like little people, okay?
And Jacques
And-
was the generic French
in-
name for people.
for ordinary
men.
people, and it was called Le Jacquerie. In Charles Dickens' Tale of Two Cities, he talks about Le Jacquerie, and he has Jacques I, Jacques II, and Jacques III, because they're not aristocrats, to show that they're just ordinary people. They don't
jackets.
deserve real names, and
Men
jackets,
just wore
and
jackets.
book jackets, and so words travel. Words start somewhere and they go somewhere else.
That's what we want kids to learn, is how they enlarged.
And the language is very dynamic, and the language is always changing. And so what happens is that we have the words in our language, and then we have new inventions or new discoveries or new paradigm shifts or new religious or social movements. Every time you have something new, you have a whole bunch of new language that you have to have. And so what happens is you use the old words, and now these old words have new meanings. And so these words keep changing according to inventions and
It
discoveries.
seems like the younger crowd likes to invent their own words
Oh, absolutely.
too, right?
Oh, in
they-
text
absolutely.
messaging. And the whole thing in text messaging and chatting is efficiency. For one reason is because on some text messaging you have to do it on a 9-unit keyboard, because it's all numbers, you know. But even if you have the BlackBerry or something where you have a whole keyboard, you know, it's so you're typing
When we
with
lived
your
in
thumbs or
Afghanistan,
your
we
fingers.
were amazed that all the vowels are left out, because they started by carving things in stone, and now we think, oh, text messaging
So
is
now we're
just
leaving
like
all of it. It's a very efficient system, and it has its own grammar, but it's not the grammar that we're used to. So we have to make some adjustments too.
I can see you guys are very excited about these types of studies. And,
Oh,
and
absolutely.
you obviously with the children, right?
We just found out our grandchildren aren't learning cursive writing anymore. They're not teaching it. I mean, this is a 10-year-old child in Kentucky, and his mother calls
Go
to say,
straight to the laptop.
and now the schools are worried because the kids don't know how to sign their names. But they learn printing, manuscript, and then they go to
Manuscript,
keyboarding.
that's the manu again.
Yeah.
The handwriting.
But they teach them keyboarding, where in Tempe we had a writers club at the junior high. None of the kids knew how to keyboard yet. They hadn't had that. So we ended up teaching typing instead of
I
creative
would rather
writing.
have keyboarding than cursive any day.
Well, we've got just a brief moment, but what else do you have that you can show us? Let's get
Well,
into a few more.
for instance, if my students ask me, what's the importance of Grimm's Law?
Oh, good heavens, don't tell them about Grimm's Law.
Well, I can tell them that there are a whole bunch of words which in a Romance language start with a K. In a
Okay.
Germanic language will start with an H.
Okay.
A K versus
Corn,
an H. So
horn.
you have corn and horn.
Okay.
And in your corn words, you have a cornucopio. Well, what would a cornucopia be in a Germanic language?
A horn
well,
of plenty.
It's a horn of plenty.
Oh,
or
I
what
see.
would
Okay.
the word corn, why is the word corn called corn? Because it's shaped like a horn. And why is a horn, what is a hornet? That's a little horn. And what is a horn of a car? The horn of a car originally was a cow's horn that you put a bulb on and you squeezed the bulb.
Okay.
And that was the horn of a car. That's why it's called the horn of a car.
But
That's a Germanic
cornet,
word.
A cornet,
A cornet,
is a kind of a horn.
a cornet, and a hornet. You see,
Wow.
if it's if it's Romance or if it's Germanic.
Right.
So believe it or not, I can teach Grimm's Law.
Well, I know you brought all sorts of examples in relation to names. Can you show another one real quick here?
Well, here's one related to grain.
Grain, okay.
Eileen?
And what we loved is it shows how a grain of rice or a grain of wheat is related to granite, the stone. It's because
Okay,
it has
I see the stone.
those little
yeah.
bumps in it.
Right.
And
Peanuts can be.
yeah, granulated peanuts, granulated sugar.
And if you have an apple that looks like it has grain in it, what would you call it?
A pomegranate.
Because
Okay.
that's from Pomona, the goddess of fruit and the harvest and that kind of thing. And you also have on a saddle, you have
Oh, the pommel is the
the
apple
pommel of a
thing.
saddle,
yeah.
and on a horse. In gymnastics, you have the
pommel horse.
The pommel horse
Yeah.
as well.
Okay.
That's
So
what
all
Don
these-
always goes off to all the other things. It never
This is-
ends when we start
We
a
have a
lesson,
name for
but-
that. It's called metonymy. It means anything that's associated with anything is called metonymy. It's a kind of metaphor.
Well, speaking of names and symbols, how about Prince? He became a symbol, did he not? At one time, his name became a symbol.
Yeah, the singer formerly known as Prince, he
Right.
insisted on this thing. Yeah, that could never have happened before media was so easy to communicate all those details.
Right.
We didn't used to have that.
A lot of people
ability.
change their names, and for instance, Arnold Schwarzenegger, it was originally
Alan-
Arnold Strong.
Yeah.
That
And he
was what
changed
his
it
manager
because he
wanted
didn't
him
think
to
we
be.
could handle Schwarzenegger.
His manager didn't think that.
But
And
then,
he said, they will learn it.
so
and we
then
did.
he went to Schwarzenegger, which was his original name. Which
Well, I
is
mean, and you
fine.
get like in wrestling, Hulk Hogan. And,
Oh, yeah.
You know, which sort of
Oh,
gives
all-
you the
all the
symbolistic
musicians.
idea that
Yeah.
the person's powerful, or
Yep.
Rock Hudson in
Oh, yeah,
movies.
yeah.
I mean,
Rock Hudson, Phoenix,
Yeah, and-
River Phoenix. There are a lot of people that are named after places also.
Well, we mentioned Parker Pens, and park, it's just someone who took care of the park. But then it came up with a whole new meaning, and I brought that picture showing. I went to Kenilworth School,
Right,
graduated in 1950, and our graduating class is all pictured out on front of the steps of the thing, and I put it in some little history of schools in Arizona. And somebody from Japan saw it, sent and asked me to send them the picture, could they use it for Parker Pens? And so they made these huge pictures all over Japan and in magazines saying when these children graduated, they received a Parker pen. Buy a Parker pen for your child at school.
well, it's amazing how names are used in literature as well.
Oh,
absolutely.
yes.
I mean, just on and on. And,
Especially J.K. Rowling
Yes.
is really, really good at names.
Yeah.
In 7 really, really long books, you have to have mnemonic devices or you're going to lose track
Right.
of people.
Yes.
So all of the names, they sort of make sense, and all of the spells, they sort of make sense.
Right.
And you have to be really careful about what you call the people and what you call the spells. They got to make sense.
Kids
You're not
could
gonna
learn
remember
Latin.
them.
They learn the Latin roots from J.K. Rowling's names, and when her books are translated, we talked to people at the humor conference who compared German, English, and French, I think it was. And we said, how did the names get translated? They stay just the same.
The names and
But-
the Latin and the spells.
But that works for all the Romance languages and other languages that have adopted Romance words too.
well, 35 years of teaching and learning.
And loving it.
And learning,
and
that's
loving
the best
it,
part, yeah.
And 50 years of marriage. Where do you see your careers going?
We're just starting.
We're just in denial. We just keep thinking we'll keep teaching, but I'm sure.
We can't think of anything that would be more fun to do than more creative and more. Creativity is very important, and in teaching, we're trying to do cutting edge. We're trying to think of the future. We're trying to sort of predict how things are going, and so creativity is what it's all about.
I taught a summer class in upstate Michigan once, and they had these little book carts that were like a podium, but there were several books under it, and I thought, this is wonderful. I can use it as a walker. I really
And we can call it books a la carte.
Back to the humor, huh? Well, hey guys, thanks so much for being on the show. Now,
We've really enjoyed it.
Do I get some sort of credit for this?
Absolutely.
College credit.
Oh, you do? Yeah, 3 hours. 3 hours of credit, absolutely.
I'll see you after the taping, then I
Okay,
sign out.
I'll sign
You-
it. It's
you
a great
too.
interview.
Okay,
Thanks a lot. We enjoyed it.
Well, that's our show, and I hope you enjoyed it. As you can see, when it comes to language, there's a lot to talk about. Well, if you want to find out more about the professor's work of study, check out their websites. Until next time,